Italy has fallen into a recession and their banking system is looking weaker and weaker every day. So let's take a look at what's happening. Italy is making waves in the news for those who are paying attention. First, they made it very clear that they don't like their central bank. Then they decided to explicitly mention Italy's gold holdings belonging to the people, not the central bank. This may seem to be a very small distinction, but perhaps if their fate is collapse and crisis, having it put into law that the gold cannot be taken away as all of Italy's assets are sold off is a very smart move. Let's see how it plays out. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today we're going to have our focus entirely on Italy and what has come up in the news recently. So let's begin by taking a look at this. Italy's leaders slammed the banking fraudsters and their nation's central bank, positioning themselves as the champions of savers and defying the European Union with a pledge to compensate investors who lost money when the lenders failed. And this really gets into gray area because you don't want to set up a moral hazard, but you also want to protect the people at the same time. So I understand how there can be a little bit of push and pull here. What's important to know is that individuals who keep their deposits in the bank, they should never have to lose any money if it's supposedly insured. Then you get into that gray area when it goes beyond that, when you're an investor, when you're a bondholder, when you own a stock. Then it may not be the case, right? Because you take that risk. But an individual who keeps a certain amount within their bank and they do so thinking that it's safe and sound and insured should never lose money because this is what they've been told. They've been promised that. So there is that area that needs to be understood. And if they do fail in that regard, where do you get the money from? Do you get it from the taxpayers? Is there a fund that's already set up there? Do you do a bail-in? This is the type of action that needs to be dealt with, of course, and you can see what's happening in the EU today. It doesn't look good at all. At the bottom, Salvini targeted both the Bank of Italy and Consob, the financial market regulator, which populists have repeatedly accused of lax supervision and allowing malpractice to flourish in the banking sector. Quote, "The Bank of Italy and Consob should be reduced to zero. More than changing one or two people, reduced to zero." Now, initially, when I saw the reports of this, it seemed like they were trying to say that they wanted to get rid of the Bank of Italy, but that's not really the way I understand it. It seems as though they just believe it's corrupt and it's garbage. It needs to be completely wiped out and then put new people in there. That's the way I understood it anyway. So that's what I wanted to bring to you, at least my interpretation of that. And it could be anything, but I don't think that this current government in Italy wants to get out of the current systems. They seem like they want to stay in the European Union. They just want to play by their own rules, and they don't seem to want to get rid of the Bank of Italy, and they seem to like that. They just want their own criteria, their own methods to deal with. We are here because those who were supposed to supervise didn't supervise. That's Salvini being quoted there. And it's interesting how they're pointing fingers. Obviously, both sides are going to point fingers at each other. But just like in the United States, the SEC is never going to be there to ensure that all of these corrupt institutions are doing what they should be doing. They're always going to go around it. Look at what's happening with Deutsche Bank as an example in Europe. You can see all throughout history how many different financial establishments did things they shouldn't have done, and then they get a slap on the wrist. The amount of money that these companies produce on an annual basis is absurd. Not just with their stock, not just with their corporate profits. I'm talking about the way that they can use derivatives to produce money out of thin air. It's even greater than what happens with the central banks. That's how powerful these institutions are. Imagine Deutsche Bank, last count, had approximately 50 trillion euro worth of derivatives. That is insanity. How that could ever be allowed, it's beyond me. But of course, when you have this level of corruption, they could do whatever they want. The Bank of Italy is a member of the ECB, which sets monetary policy for the 19-country euro currency zone, as well as the supervising its banking sector. Personally, as far as I'm concerned, they wouldn't have anything to do with a free country, but of course, that's just not the way it is today. Salvini also called for a, quote, reset of both institutions, and that's very interesting to see if that actually does take place. I'm not sure it will, but perhaps they do something where they get rid of one or two people and suggest that things are better now. We'll see how it plays out. Definitely, if you don't see it in the news, I'll be bringing it to you here. If it's of any good information for you, I will. And then I believe it was 1 or 2 days later where Salvini comes out and actually talks up seizing control of Italy's gold reserves. Now, you have to understand how much gold they have, and you also have to look at what this really means. Matteo Salvini had raised the possibility of wresting control of Italy's sizable gold reserves away from the country's central bank in the latest in a series of threats to the independence of the Bank of Italy by Rome's populist coalition. And by the way, just wanted to interject the fact that every single article I have seen always mentions the fact that they are supposedly populist. Every single one. They can't mention the current government without putting the word populist in there in the first or second sentence. I don't know why they do this all the time, but it is terrible the way that these news agencies constantly bombard a certain individual with a certain term. They do this over and over and over again to make sure that you associate the two terms together. That's the way it is. And unfortunately, this is happening to so many people being branded the wrong thing. I'm not necessarily backing up those in Italy or anywhere else. I'm just saying I see this all the time. Quote, "The gold is the property of the Italian people, not of anyone else." That's what Salvini said, and that is very big. The comments came after he called for the removal of the leadership of the Bank of Italy for failing to prevent the country's banking crisis. And then, of course, they have to come out and do damage control and say, you are threatening the independence of the Bank of Italy. Look, the Bank of Italy shouldn't be independent. There's no reason for it to even exist. Why would the central bank of a country need to be independent of that country? You're telling me that it's operating outside of the control of your parliament, of your Congress. Why would you ever want that? That is insanity. And even if you start talking about it, it's dismissed. It's like if you ever worked at a company and you mention something that's really touchy. Maybe it's about a certain group of people or a certain project you've worked on, and then you're maybe the new person there and you mention it and everyone just says, no, you know what, just leave it. Just leave it alone. Don't worry about it. Don't worry. But just forget about it. And that's the type of behavior that goes all throughout politics. And unfortunately, with the central banks, it's a huge issue. Nobody ever wants to talk about the fact that there actually is no purpose to having a central bank. Your own treasury or equivalent can do that. They can do all the functions. Look, for example, at the United States. You have a treasury which literally does the printing of all the bills and everything, and then you have the Federal Reserve that sits on the outside of that and apparently needs independence, and they do the functions of setting interest rate, and they do all of the different open market operations. They have a balance sheet, and they are able to print money out of thin air and give it to institutions all over the world, and nobody is allowed to know what they do at any time. Does that sound logical? Does that sound very good for your country? That somehow losing independence is gonna be a bad thing? Well, to me, I guess we're seeing differently. Italy's populists, there it is again, they're calling on lawmakers to pass a legislation stating that its gold holdings worth almost $100 billion belongs to the state. At the very bottom, my bill only aims at making clear that the gold belongs to the state, not to the government. If there are doubts on our intentions, we can pass another law saying none of the gold reserves can be sold unless there is a majority of 2/3 or more of both houses of parliament. Now, I'm going to show you the gold reserves of Italy in just a moment, but I wanted to interject what I was thinking, what I was conjuring up in my head, why you would want to do this. Now, if you look at Canada as an example, they sold off all their gold reserves. They have nothing. There's nothing left. And this is interesting because it's the complete opposite of what you see other central banks around the world doing. For example, China, Russia, they are accumulating more gold every single year. And this is a complete opposite, right? So So what I see with Italy potentially here is that they can see the future and they see that their assets are going to be sold off just like they were in Greece. And that's obviously very, very bad. With gold, they can at least have something tangible to sell should they need it. Okay, and they can decide that at the time they see which benefits them. But if you're about to face a crisis, it would make sense to have all those assets belonging to the individual, not the central banks who could sell it off, who can do whatever they want with it. Who knows what these central banks do? But if it belongs to the state, at least there's more supervision of it, and they have quite a bit of money. If you look at the size of the economy compared to the size of their gold reserves, it's significant. Of course, there's much more money in circulation, not talking about that, but at least it is one of the largest holdings in the world today. And we see them protecting it, holding on to it, and I think that this could be in preparation of worsening times. We know what's going to happen to Italy. I think it's very clear. We are seeing it getting worse, and obviously the government here right now is trying to make change, but the ship is already sinking, and the weight that's pulling it down, the EU, is not really going to let go of their grip. So we're going to see what happens to Italy. I really don't have good fortune in the future for this country, despite the fact that it obviously has such a important, rich history, and yet it's being destroyed every single day on many levels. Quarterly official gold reserves, you can follow along on gold.org, and it's interesting because you can type in a country and add them to this chart here and see their accumulation since the year 2000. It allows you to go that far back, and then it basically breaks that down into their tons, how many tons they have out of these central banks between China, India, Russia, Italy, and Canada. I put that one in there just for fun. You can see that they've accumulated in the example of Italy, looks like over 2,000 tons, which I'll show you more accurately in a moment. And then you'll see China, India, Russia all have accumulated more over the years. And then at the bottom of the list, let me put my mouse over there, Canada at 0. Congratulations, Canada. You sold off everything you had. Wonderful. And now they're left with an even worse economy, so that isn't a good thing. And you can see this information, which is Italy's gold reserves, on tradingeconomics.com. They have a lot of this type of information. This shows us that they have about 2451 tons. This data goes back, I think, to the year 2000, just showing you they have not really changed. This number here, it looks like it has dropped a lot, but actually that's an extremely small amount. What we are seeing is that they just kept them at the same level. They haven't bought, they haven't sold, but they do have a very large amount compared to the other countries around the world. I think they're the 4th or 5th largest holder of gold today. But have no fear about Italy's banking system. It's doing well, according to CNBC. Italian banking shares jump on the quote, not so bad news from the ECB. What a joke we have today when not so bad news is great news somehow. Italian banks have been at the forefront of many investors' concerns. The economy is officially in a technical recession, which of course has an impact on the banking system. However, news that the capital positions of certain banks are higher from what regulators have demanded has brought some relief. That's amazing. We were expecting right at the bottom, and it's about a ½ inch above that. Excellent. Congratulations, Italy's banking system. You've done so well. Here's a high five. Here's a little check mark. You've done so well. I'm going to end the video there. If you found it informative, please give me a thumbs up. When you give me a thumbs up, you are supporting this channel. That's what you got to do. You click the like button and you support me. And that basically helps to push these videos higher up into the search rankings to let other people know that this is good info. So just click that button. I appreciate it. And last but not least, if you want the financial education you were not taught in school, these 2 books have everything that you need. You can take a look through them if you're interested. It's all at Amazon.com. The link is below. Check it out. If you want the audiobook, you can get that at themoneygps.com.